Hello, my name is Matthew, and earlier this year, a few months ago, I was attempting to read Joseph and His Brothers by Thomas Mann, and in the book, um, Nimrod is discussed, and Nimrod is this biblical warrior who is known for his um, cunning and being adept. And as I was reading it, all I could think about are the Bugs Bunny cartoons, where Bugs sees, Elmer Fudd bumbling around, and he says, like, "What are you, a regular Nimrod?" And from what I understand, at the time, people that were watching the cartoon didn't understand the illusion and thought Nimrod meant a bumbling, stupid person. So the irony was lost, and all of a sudden, the meaning of the word Nimrod changed forever. And it got me thinking. It's something I've been thinking about off and on through the year. Um, was how attitudes and meanings and how our opinions change through time. And I wrote out a bunch of questions. So this is going to be a book tag. I'm going to call it the Nimrod Book Tag. And it's all about how our opinions change. But the first question, I sort of can't help myself. Um, what are some books that have made you feel stupid? And there's a lot of ways to take that. Like for me, the first book that kind of always comes to mind was the Karamazov brothers. I had to read it 3 times. The first 2 times were just baffling. I felt like a grade schooler not understanding the words on the page and like knowing that I was missing something. But you can also think of books that you feel stupider because you have read them. So, sometime last year, I read the Donald Trump Jr. book, Triggered, and felt like could have missed that one. But recently, um, some of the books that are on the forefront of my attention um, right now, the Canterbury Tales by Chaucer. There's so many of my best reading experiences leave me feeling that there's so much that I need to learn. Um, Constantly going like, what is Henry James talking about? What is Faulkner talking about? What is James Joyce saying? And on and on and on. But there are moments where um, something very particular pricks you in the rib. And for some reason, I'm very interested in spending a lot of time doing my best to learn how to read Middle English. Um, I've been working on it a little bit, and I'm excited to put a lot of effort into it very soon. The other book that I want to mention, or writer, is Livy, and I read the first volume that I have of the early Rome. I picked up Hannibal's War to show you, but really, as I was reading the first book of Livy, thinking, I want to know more about Roman history. I just don't know enough. And that's what I mean by feeling stupid. Question number 2. Books you wanted to love and just couldn't. So something that you were looking forward to or excited about and putting all of your good faith in, and the book or the author just didn't deliver. And the first one, which is this has been a constant journey with this author, but it's Emile Zola. This is an author that I really want to like, and it's always satisfactory. I've never loved anything that he's written, and for some reason I just want to. I'm giving him a lot of credit. I feel like I'm meeting him more than halfway, and it just hasn't clicked yet. The other writer is Gerald Murnane, and the book I have here is Border Districts, and I read an article maybe in the New Yorker or the New York Review or something, and it was a whole write-up about this guy, and he was an eccentric, like solitary hermit that lived in the desert of Australia, and he was a bartender, and all the while he was this brilliant writer, and he was a writer's writer, so not many people knew about him, but the people that were in the know knew about him. And he had this book coming out, and it's going to be his magnum opus, this thing. I read this article, and I got jazzed up about it. And it was boring. It was hard to think anyone was getting excited about this author, and it's the only thing I've read, so there's something there, but I wanted to like him, and then it just wasn't there for me. Books you wanted to hate but couldn't. And the first one I'll show you, and this is books, authors, writers, however, but it's Wordsworth. And I read a biography, this is years ago, but I read a Coleridge biography by Richard Holmes, a terrific 2-part biography. And as I was reading it, I was also reading Coleridge poems, sort of like side by side, and really gaining an admiration for Coleridge's life and work. And as I was reading it, I started just feeling like, William Wordsworth isn't really treating Coleridge very nicely. I don't like how Wordsworth is treating him. And it was as if I got like a personal grudge. I'm friends with Coleridge, and here's this other person being mean to him. And I've been reading Wordsworth now for years, and I was very cold and distant, and he won me over. Also, my knowledge of their relationship has become much more significant. I understand much more about how what their dynamic was, and Wordsworth's role and perspective in their association. So there's that too. But Wordsworth is just brilliant. I love reading Wordsworth. Also, a book that I didn't want to like. A great example would be Blood Meridian. This is a book that I've heard about for years. Anytime I was out reading at a cafe and a stranger came up to me, and after a brief conversation wanted to recommend a book to me, it was 9 out of 10 times it was Blood Meridian. And I got so sick of hearing it that I shunned the book. I just thought, like, you know what? No, thank you. When I finally did read it, I felt justified because I hated it. But another one, like, around the same vein is Catch-22. by Joseph Heller. And it's the same sort of scenario. It's a book that I felt like I was getting nagged about, kept hearing about, and it's like human instinct. It's like sort of get put off. Um, but it was terrific. Just a lot of really good things working. It's funny, really like the fun. There's a lot of funny parts, and they're really funny, and just a great satire and a great story. Um, the other one that I'll show you is this ridiculous. I don't even know who wrote this thing. Oh my gosh, it's a biography of Rasputin, and it's the Holy Devil. That's the sub. Rasputin, the Holy Devil by Rene Fulop Miller. And this is before I read this before I was reading all of the Russian writers. I don't even know if I'd read any Russian writers, but at some point somebody handed me this thing, and I remember thinking like I am going to be bored to tears. This ugly thing and this ugly guy. It's still one of the best books. It's such an incredible life, and not only is his life told with such energy, but the world building or the depiction of Russia at the time was so interesting and eye-opening and alien. Such a different world than the world that I live in. I was so swept away by this like, very unbecoming thing. Let's see. Books you no longer enjoy. So something that when you were young, you read and you really liked, and you've gone back to it, and maybe you don't hate it, but that spark isn't there anymore. And I pulled just a couple, but this is a very large part of my reading. Or this would be the question that I would probably have the longest list for, but Nietzsche. I there's a handful of philosophers that I feel like I've learned a lot from, been interested in, and I've kind of put my work in, I feel, trying to enjoy Nietzsche, grasp some sort of thread of usefulness or just something. And when I was younger, he's such a name, and you hear it a lot, and it's almost like it's cool to read Nietzsche, and the fact that it's hard to understand can be alluring, and it's written in like a very manic way because he was crazy, but it felt fun at the time that you're going to decode something and some amazing message is going to pop out at some time. And I just sort of gave up and decided, like, I don't think that there's going to be much here. Christopher Hitchens. This is his essays, and he's one of those writers that, even though he was older, it was right around the time where he was everywhere. He had God Is Not Great coming out, and he was one of those very fashionable, cool writers that was out at the time. And the tricky thing is that he's a great writer. He's really easy to read, and I mean, he has book reviews that are terrific and a lot of nonfiction that I think really, really, I think holds up. What I don't think is that he was nearly as profound or smart as he thought he was. And he, he's certainly convincing. Um, but I still give him some credit, but it's a writer that I've kind of decided, like, he's not as good as he thinks he is. And the other one I'll mention is George Orwell, but specifically 1984 and Animal Farm. And again, I was one of those people that read those two books and it blew my mind. And I love Orwell. Nearly any one of his other novels or nonfiction work, I think, is dramatically more impressing and more well done than either 1984 or Animal Farm. Let's see. Books that won you over upon rereading. So something that you read one time and maybe didn't hate it, but middle of the road, and then years go by, and you pick it up again, and it's eye-opening. Something has unlocked, and you've basically discovered a whole new writer or a whole new book. And the biggest one for me, and the only writer that I'll mention for this question, is Virginia Woolf. And the first time I came across, it was probably to the Lighthouse. I have pulled up Orlando to show you. It was mostly that it was baffling. It's hard to not see how beautiful of a writer she is, how just beautiful sentences. But I felt like I don't really know what's happening here, and I feel like as I became a more capable reader, a more considerate reader, and also just older, I was able to approach her writing from a different angle that allowed me to get into the rhythm of some of the most gorgeous prose that you can read in the English language. And it's not just superficial purple prose. It's the whole package. It's amazing when those things sort of pop out of the sea, and you're able to grab it. Let's see. Books that you love by a writer that you dislike, and this might be better to frame it as no longer living. I don't really care, but as far as I don't know, hurting someone's feelings, and so a writer that I still like, but I think was a terrible person, is Hunter S. Thompson. And as I've been getting older, there's less and less of his writing that I like. I'm still left with his letters. His letters when he was a young man, I think, are so impressive, revealing about him and America at the time. He traveled a lot, but I have a hard. There's so little redeeming. So little redeeming qualities about him as a person. Even like being young and thinking like, oh, Raoul Duke, like how fun, and not getting it anymore. Just thinking like, no, you're being a jerk. And then maybe just for fun, a writer that you like as a person, where you just don't think their writing is any good. It's someone that you think, like, I like this person, and you can't get behind the work that they produce. This is probably like an optional question, maybe. And this is a living writer, but whatever. John Green, and I have this thing. I like that he makes those educational videos. He does seem to have a relatively positive presence. I feel like he does a lot of things that he doesn't have to. Just in general, I kind of like what he's doing. And so I bought this, and this is very telling. This is a signed copy. So here's John Green's signature. But the signed copy was cheaper than the unsigned copy. And this is Turtles All the Way Down, and it's startling how bad it is. It's YA, and I don't really read that genre, so I don't want to pick on it too much, but it wasn't just dull. It was hard to read. I think I have one last question. Books that you still want to love one day. So you've read it, and maybe you hated it, or didn't get it, or was lukewarm about it, but you might think to yourself, like, I want to go back to it. This is a book that I still feel has merit. And the biggest one for me, the first thing that comes to mind, is several novels by Henry James. I pulled Wings of the Dove, and it's one of those things where there's so much. This is almost as if a parallel to the first time I had read Virginia Woolf. There's so much right happening. It's obvious to tell that you are in the hands of a careful, considerate, intelligent writer who is a master at his craft and can tell a story, and it can be interesting. And I'm not getting it, where it's not enjoyable, it's not entertaining, it's difficult. It's just puzzling, and I feel like with a little bit of effort and a little bit of time, I might learn to love this writer, and it's a writer that I feel like is worth loving. So that's what I have, and I don't know if this is interesting at all as far as a book tag, but I wrote down a couple names of people that I'd be interested to hear their answers to these questions. So Alan Morton, Amy from the Dusty Bookshelf, Rambling Raconteur, Steve Donahue. Steve, I'm saying your name. So Steve Donahue, Sean Steadfast, Lukash at Totally Pretentious, the Codex Cantina, and Brian from Bookish. So if this interests you at all, I know that I would be very interested in hearing your responses to these questions. And this is a very long video, and I've been talking a lot, and I'll end here. And please leave a comment if you would like, and thank you for watching.